Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today's video, running back rankings for week 3. We look at the top 30 at the position, help you set your lineups for the third week of the fantasy football season. You 2-0 in any leagues yet?
Yep, 2-0 in one league. I've just smashed my opponents both weeks in one league. Really good last week, Chubb. I had the old Chubb Lamar Jackson stack, and then this league we have defenses and kickers, and I had the Bucks D as well.
I'm 0-2 in the listener league, and both weeks the guy scored the most fantasy points on the week.
Too bad. Yeah, my team in the listeners league hasn't been doing too hot because I have Joe Shiesty. He's been poop, and yeah, all the other players that I've started just haven't had the old brain machine on when I'm making my start sits. So.
Brain machine. Okay, we'll get to, again, the top 30 of the position. If you guys are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. If you guys enjoy the video, like, and comment down below with any questions you might have at the running back position. Happy to answer them. But let's get into the top 6. We'll get through these ones quickly. A lot of really good matchups for some of these top tier guys this week. As we get to number 1 with Jonathan Taylor. The Colts here looking for a better game script this week for him to be able to run the ball. He had a disappointing week last week in a game there that he just played like complete and utter dog shit. And honestly, the Jags have been pretty good against the run so far this year too. So something to keep an eye on. But Taylor at 1, Mixon over at 2, someone I'm very high on this week against the Jets. His usage is very, very high.
Yeah. I mean, we saw what Nick Chubb did when he got the ball against this Jets run defense. I'm not saying Joe Mixon is going to score 3 touchdowns, but this week is when he's going to score his first touchdown of the season.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, they have to. I would hit that his anytime touchdown prop for sure. And like Tyler said, like he's used in all of the main facets of the game. He's on the field all the time. The 2 minutes in the last 2 minutes of each half, he's very involved in the offense and even in the red zone too. So it's kind of like it's annoying, obviously, for fantasy owners because you want the guy to produce right away, but he'll get there.
McCaffrey in at 3. I think the Saints, of course, are a tough matchup to be able to run the football, and the Panthers haven't been able to score much yet, giving him those opportunities. But to be able to give you six more points on top of his yardage totals, but. In any case, as long as McCaffrey's healthy, he's in the top 5. DeAndre Swift at number 4. I really like this matchup against the Vikings defense. Swift has been incredibly efficient so far. We talked about it in the preseason. It's just happening into this week. And then I do have Austin Eckler in at 5, despite the Jacksonville run defense.
Yeah, these two guys you have coming up next is a tough one because both these guys haven't really performed to what people are probably expecting them at this point. Dalvin Cook, for one, has finished as the RB 20 and 38. Yep. I wouldn't read too much into that. He was having he was getting the ball pretty much the entire game against the Eagles. It was only in the fourth quarter we saw Alexander Mattison just because the game was relatively over at that point. Yep. And Austin Eckler as well. It's kind of tough because Sonny Michel got all the inside the 5 carries last week, so that's obviously a cause for concern, maybe a little bit. It could change week over week. But the one thing that is a little bit encouraging, he's obviously heavily involved, like I kind of said with Joe Mixon, in the important parts of the game. The last 2 minutes of the game, he added 6.8 points in PPR leagues. Yeah. That's huge, and that actually put him into RB1 category last week. So Austin Eckler is finding different ways to become an RB1. As soon as he starts finding the end zone, I think fantasy owners are going to be happy with where they drafted him.
Yeah, definitely some concern with like you mentioned in the some important touches being stolen, but the Jags give him an opportunity as a pass catcher to perform really well this week too. Cook, I like. I still think the Lions defense has some problems, and I think Cook. This could be a better game script for the Vikings. This is a game they usually, in a divisional game, they usually perform well in. So Cook is I think someone will be in for volume and potentially can find the end zone. And the Vikings have given up, or the Lions have given up plenty of points. All right, as we flip over to the next 6, Saquon Barkley in at 7. The opportunity is there for him. The Cowboys' run defense has been all right so far this year. It hasn't been great, but it was decent last week against Joe Mixon and the Bengals. So Saquon's usage, great. And then we get over to Nick Chubb. The Steelers have been good against the run so far, which was not the case last year. How I'm using in terms of my analysis and ranking these players, I'm still not using everything from the last 2 weeks in terms of my data. I'm still looking a bit at last year, and Chubb, is splitting touches and splitting snaps with Kareem Hunt, but I still see him as a valuable play here and continuing with his success this week. Obviously, we don't have him in the top 5 like he was last week, but I still think a positive matchup and a game that they are favored in at home. So
his over over-under rushing prop for this game, I think, is around between 75 and 78, depending on what book you're looking at. Would you take that over or under, do you think? If you have to pick right
if I had to. If I had to, I'd probably lean towards the over. Not by a lot though. Like that's a significant, it's a pretty significant amount, even if they are favored. Derrick Henry in at 9. The Raiders' run defense has actually been solid the first 2 weeks of the year, and Henry has struggled. But I think this is a game both teams need very badly. So I think Henry will continue to be relied upon, and the volume will still be there for him.
Yeah, he's their best player, right? He's their playmaker. Dontrell Hilliard kind of stole, I would say, 2 touchdowns from him in week 1. And then last week against the Bills, they really just couldn't get anything going. This Bills defense has looked really good. So although the Vegas defense has looked good to this point, Derrick Henry will definitely be the best back they've seen so far. So I feel like he could be in for a better game than the last 2 weeks for sure.
Fournette in at 10. I still, he's missing the touchdown, but the Packers have been suspect against the run last season and looked like it last week against the Bears as well with Montgomery. So I expect, the usage is still there. Rachaad White had 2 touches last week. So Fournette is definitely firing away and could find the end zone this week. What do you think of Najee Harris? I think the only way that the Browns defense is really gettable is going to be on the ground. I know Harris is a little banged up and the line isn't there, but I still think he's still a decent play this week.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought we'd see a little bit more of Jaylen Warren against the Pats last week, and it actually turned out that Najee Harris saw more carries and more snaps on the field and rushing attempts than in week 1. Could have been the fact that he didn't really play the tail end of that game against the Bengals as much. But the one thing that I saw, 4% of his carries or receptions have gone over or 10 plus yards 4% of the time. So he's not really explosive. He's not he's not making use of his carries right now. I think this kind of looks back at last year. He just got the ball so much. He got so many catches. He was one of the most targeted running backs last year with Ben Roethlisberger. Seems like that's not really the route that they're going with Trubisky at this point, but it could change against this Browns team because their secondary is pretty solid. So
okay, closing out Aaron Jones at 12. I know the Bucs are known to be a great run defense. Aaron Jones, of course, can work as a pass catcher, and the Bucs run defense isn't quite as good as it was last year, so it's less scary for a guy like Aaron Jones. Flipping over to the next 6 here, Alvin Kamara in at 13. His obviously was absent last week. I think he'll be back. His target per route run when he was on the field in week 1 was 24%. I still think he's going to be his usual self as a pass catcher. The Panthers have been right. I think they're 18th in the league right now in terms of run defense, so still a good matchup for him on the ground as well. And I think if he's back, if he's healthy, we're going to be firing away. Antonio Gibson in at 14 against the Eagles. Where are we at with Gibson? I still think he's had a couple solid weeks. The Eagles haven't been fantastic against the run, and he's obviously still working as a pass catcher.
Yeah, we saw Dalvin Cook struggle a little bit more against the Eagles than the Lions backs did in week 1. But like we talked about it in our previous show, Antonio Gibson is a perfect sell high candidate. I would think he would have another great week this week. He's going to be heavily featured with Brian Robinson still on the mend. But when Brian Robinson comes back, I think this backfield is going to look a lot different.
Yeah, Miles Sanders in at 15. Washington has been brutal against the run so far. James Robinson, DeAndre Swift. So I really like Sanders. His usage was even better last week. Once the game kind of got out of we saw the Kenny Gainwell. I wouldn't call it a fumble, but it was a pass to him that bounced off his hands and then went into a defender's hands. That's not going to bode well with the head coach. Sanders was efficient in his carries. I think this is a big week for him against the Washington defense. Where are you at with Javonte Williams? This is a tough matchup.
Yeah, this is a guy that, for one, I'm trying to trade for right now because he hasn't scored yet. And when people get frustrated with touchdown volume for running backs that they've drafted early, people tend to kind of react incorrectly, I guess you'd say. But still, I mean, I think his ranking is correct for this week. Some of the guys that you have in front of him wouldn't usually find themselves in front of him just because of the matchups they had. But I still think he's definitely a viable option. He's continually being more targeted in the passing game, and this Broncos offense just has to get rolling. It could be against this Niners defense. It'd be tough. It'd be tougher. Primetime game as well. Yep. But you have to start Javonte this week.
Yeah. Agreed. Dave Montgomery in at 17, a good matchup against the Houston Texans.
Yeah, really
coming off a really good week. So we're still going there. Not much to talk about on that side. A.J. Dillon comes in at 18. Obviously, his role is more on the ground, so this could be affected in terms of fantasy finish when it is the Bucs. They're still like probably top 12 run D, I would say, in the league, top 10, even with not being as filled out this year in the front four. So still someone to play,
sure.
but something to keep an eye on, especially in DFS. Ezekiel Elliott, I have at 18. Tony Pollard broke the big play last week. That was the reason that he was a decent fantasy play for you, and not Ezekiel Elliott. The Giants have been one of the worst teams against the run through 2 weeks. It was similar to that last year as well. So I think Zeke is still, he still has about a 65% share of the rushing attempts. So there's still enough there for me that I think he can still be like a back end. That's what I have him as, right? Like a back end RB2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that ranking. It's tough to really gauge this offense and what they're going to look like with Cooper Rush. Like it could change week to week. Like last week, he did look pretty solid. Cooper Rush, that being, as Tyler mentioned, Tony Pollard was the beneficiary of one big play. Other than that, the running backs really didn't do much. So I think this is a fine ranking for where he's going and someone you could obviously still start.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs in at 20. The Titans been pretty good against the Saquon ran on him well. Devin Singletary not so much. I really like Jacobs' opportunity and usage through 2 weeks, especially last week. He's taking everything. He's their guy. I still think he's someone that obviously needs to find did he find the end zone this past week?
Josh Jacobs?
Yeah. No, he didn't. So he hasn't found the end zone yet, but someone that you can still rely upon as an RB20. James Robinson in at 21. Game script could be an issue here. He is a guy that comes off the field for passing downs pretty much all the time, but the Chargers are very accepting to the run. They're willing to allow teams to run the ball well if it keeps them from throwing the football. Their run defense has been much improved, but still an opportunity for them. So if early on, you could see Robinson find some production. But I don't, after a few big weeks, that doesn't mean I'm going to have him as inside my top 20 this week. What do you think about Jeff Wilson? With the injury to Price.
Yeah, I really like Jeff Wilson this week. He's pretty much the only running back left now in this running back room.
Yeah.
Tyrion Davis-Price and him kind of split carries, I would say almost evenly last week.
Close.
It was pretty close, but I think against this Denver defense, that their running defense is bottom 5 graded on PFF right now.
Yep.
Their secondary is also banged up. Pat Surtain won't be playing this week, so I think Jeff Wilson is a sneaky good start. And with Jimmy G at quarterback now, look for him to get a little bit more red zone volume as well.
Yeah, 100%. I like Jeff Wilson this week, and Jordan Mason will probably be involved, but Jeff Wilson is now kind of asserted himself as the for sure RB1. Cordero Patterson at 23. The Seahawks, like I've always said, I do respect their run defense. This is a chance, though, for Patterson to continue to be involved as a pass catcher. Tyler Algier is going to have those opportunities as well on the ground. So Patterson, in terms of got to be able to be efficient with his touches, which he can still do against the Seahawks in the air. But I think a raking as a back-end RB2 is appropriate for this week. Kareem Hunt. What do you think about Kareem Hunt?
I like Kareem Hunt this week. We've seen what the Steelers have given up to in terms of receptions and receiving backs. Joe Mixon had a ton of catches and was really efficient as a receiving back in week 1.
Yep.
And then against the Patriots as well. Damon Harris and Ramondre Stevenson both had 2 or 3 catches, I believe. So I see, although Nick Chubb obviously will be on the field, I still see Kareem Hunt having a pretty good receiving game this week. I do really like his receiving prop over 15.5 receiving yards for Thursday Night Football. I think that's something that people could take advantage of. He had 16 receiving yards last week, and to be honest, he could have had way more. We saw his kind of volume was in week 1 against the Panthers, so I really like Kareem Hunt this week.
Yeah, Thursday Night Football. If you aren't already on Betfred, bet 50, get 250 with Betfred for Thursday Night Football. Like you said, you're on Kareem Hunt over 15.5 receiving yards.
Yes.
I really like George Pickens over 25.5 receiving yards. Obviously, we've talked about a fair bit how good I think the Cleveland Browns defense is in the secondary. Pickens in a spot here where, he's had 3 targets in back-to-back weeks. Mitch Trubisky mentioned after their game on Sunday that they really should be getting him more involved and want to get him more involved. So that's a good sign in and of itself from his quarterback. But as well, this is the chance for him to be getting, the cornerback 3 in this offense or from this defense and not having to worry about, a Denzel Ward or a John Johnson or a Greg Newsome in coverage. We're looking at their third option. So Pickens could be a target this week, and 25.5 is a number that I'm willing to get in on with Pickens. So that's where I'm at Thursday Night Football. We did great last week.
Yep.
We had
2-0
with McKinnon and Mike Williams. So go check that out over at Betfred. Again, link is down below in the description for that. Now we move to our last 6 guys. Clyde EdwardsHelaire, he's a ways down for us. He's not inside my top 12, not inside my top 20, outside of RB2 category. Again, this is an offense that is splitting between him and McKinnon pretty evenly. The Colts are a tough defense to go up against. And I think McKinnon has been running more routes. So I think there's a lot less to work with here for Helaire and a tougher matchup on the ground that I don't have a lot of confidence in him in terms of being a high-end option. I can still play him as like considered to be my flex play, but at 25 is where I've got him. What do you think of the Rams offense here?
Yeah, it's tough. Like we saw Cam Akers after week 1 pretty much being invisible in this offense. Last week, he outcarried Darrell Henderson. He was on the field for more running plays as well. Darrell Henderson ran more routes and was targeted more in the receiving game, which is definitely something to note. And Darrell Henderson did end up scoring, but it seemed like Cam Akers was the guy that they're going with as their RB1, I would say.
Yeah, so Henderson gets the score, right? So I still think Henderson is a pass catcher, and Akers' efficiency was garbage. So I still would rely more on Henderson, but it is a good matchup against Arizona. So I think both are playable options. They used the run game a fair bit last week. They could here in another game they're favored in. So Henderson, not a high upside option, but still a decent option. Dameon Pierce, I'm finally feeling like I can play Dameon Pierce this week.
I really like Dameon Pierce.
Touches were there, which was good last week. He took over from Burkhead. Burkhead had like 2 carries, I think. And then we get the Bears. So I think you can play Dameon Pierce with some confidence this week. He's my RB 27 though.
Yeah, I would have him, I think, a little bit higher ranked. I think I would have him just ahead of Cordarrelle on our rankings for this week. The Bears have given up 190 yards per game on the ground over the first 2 games of the season. And one thing to note, Tyler kind of talked about it, Rex Burkhead had no second half carries last week. So I feel like Dameon Pierce, they're trying to get him worked into this backfield a little bit more. And I think against this Bears is a great opportunity for Lovie Smith to really punch it.
Yeah, 100%. Rashad Penny in at 28. Kenneth Walker had a few touches last week. It still was Rashad Penny as the number 1 option. We've got the Falcons here, a game that the Seahawks can win. So they'll be able to put it on the ground here against the Falcons. So I think he's, a guy you can rely upon in the flex. Not a lot of, I'm not screaming from the mountaintops to play him, but I do think that if you have him, this is how could you not be playing him if you drafted him in this spot? Damian Harris. So I do think the matchup is good, but Ramondre Stevenson is out snapping him. Obviously, that's because of his work as a pass catcher too. So again, these guys have this is Damian Harris, who I liked last week, who gave us a good return last week. This is a good matchup, but again, we're just so touchdown dependent here.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Damian Harris is touchdown reliant for sure in terms of being a viable fantasy option. I still think you can start him this week against the Ravens, but like I said, if he doesn't score a touchdown, you're probably looking at 7 points or 8 points.
Yeah, exactly. Rounding things out, Raheem Mostert as my RB 30. Usage was there for him in terms of getting the carries. The Bills' run defense doesn't grade out very, very high in the first few weeks. I still think it's still a solid run defense. The Dolphins, again, the run game is looking better, and Mostert is the beneficiary of that. So still a bit of a desperate play as my RB 30, but still someone you can play. And then, like I mentioned, that's a total of top 30, but Cam Akers is my RB 31, so someone you can still consider. Anyone that I missed that you were kind of surprised by?
No, I think all the guys that kind of just finished between 30 and 40 on your list here are pretty true. Travis Etienne, like we still haven't seen him get going yet, and I think James Robinson is someone that you definitely have to keep your eye on. It doesn't make sense in my head that this usage will continue throughout the entirety of the season. I feel like Travis Etienne is script.
We need more losing game scripts for the Jags, which
that's exactly
we expected, right? It hasn't happened yet.
And I think that could be it against Chargers this week. Chargers front has looked really good, and I think they'll look to dump it off to Etienne and maybe get him continue and get him more involved in this passing game, because I think that's definitely where his value is seen.
And then last thing would be no James Conner in the rankings, right? I don't think he's going to play this week. They said it's not long term, but they said it's not long term. That doesn't mean he can't miss this week, which I think is possible. Darrell Williams right now is my RB 35. He is definitely the one that was more involved last week, and I think will be the RB1. But I think Eno Benjamin will be involved as a pass catcher, and this Rams front is the best in the NFL right now against the run. So tough matchup for him on the ground. And then Benjamin taking some of the passing work is an issue in a game that's going to be very tough for the Cardinals. So that's where I have him, just if you were noting that. But again, if you guys are new, go check out Betfred. Bet 50, get 250 over at Betfred, Thursday Night Football. So go check that out there. The link is down below in the description. Join our Discord. That link is down below as well. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. Like the video, and we will see you guys in the next one.